Doug Bandow is the senior fellow at the Cato Institute and former special assistant to President Ronald Reagan. He joins us from Washington, D.C. A very warm welcome to Al Jazeera. I could start by asking you what purpose you think this joint public appearance of the heads of these two secretive organizations serves right now.
I think part of this is to put gentle pressure on Israel. Both the United States and United Kingdom have been very strong supporters of Israel. Provided arms, have backed them, diplomatically. And what this tells me is both of them are pushing hard if they're working together. They're trying to get an agreement between Israel and Hamas, and there's general recognition that Netanyahu has been a barrier to getting that agreement.
So they've both talked at length about the need to support the UN Charter and global norms and international standards of law, particularly when it comes to Russia and China. But there doesn't seem to be any mention of Israel and breaches of international law when it comes to the war in Gaza. What does that say to you?
Well, what that tells me is that in both countries, Israel is a domestic political issue. I can state that categorically in the United States. The Republican Party never likes to criticize Israel. The Democratic Party has some divisions, but President Biden has declared he's the most pro-Israel president ever. So what that does is makes politicians in the United States reluctant to criticize Israel, even when it appears to be guilty of the same breaches of international law as other countries.
Doug, stay with us, because I want to open up the conversation a little bit more, because both spy chiefs also discussed Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a war that's been going on for 2.5 years, and a joint opinion piece. They said staying the course is more vital than ever. Putin will not succeed in extinguishing Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. Russia's actions are a flagrant breach of the UN Charter and global norms, as I mentioned. On Ukraine's surprise incursion in Kursk, they said it was atypically audacious and a bold move by the Ukrainians to try and change the game. And I think they have changed the narrative and really brought the war home to Russia. Doug, back to you. How might Russia and China, do you think, calibrate its response to what we've heard from the UK and US spy chief? Putin's often cast by Western intelligence agencies as the eternal Bond villain that the world needs saving from. Is there a degree of double standards here?
Well, of course. Quite honestly, Saudi Arabia has killed more Yemenis than Russia has killed Ukrainians. The United States invasion of Iraq was a flagrant violation of international law. So there's an element of do what we say, not as we do. What we see Russia having done was a blatant aggression. It was wrong. And he deserved to be criticized and deserved to have a world reaction. But you would wish that the countries doing the criticizing would also live by the same standards. And unfortunately, both the United States and United Kingdom have some problems in that regard.
What do you mean by problems in that regard? Help us understand.
Well, first, for example, the invasion of Iraq, it was conducted heavily by the United States and backed by the United Kingdom, the Blair government. And that was clearly a violation of international law. The justifications were basically, you can argue whether they were lies or misjudgments, but they were wrong. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilians ended up dying. And you look at the treatment of Israel, a willingness not to talk about, what Israel has done. In a country like Saudi Arabia, both the U.S. and the United Kingdom love to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, and they don't worry about how those weapons have been used. And an awful lot of Yemeni civilians, innocent people, have died over the last decade, with Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis involved.
It's been really interesting talking to you, Doug. Doug Bandow, senior fellow at the Cato Institute and former special assistant to President Ronald Reagan. Many thanks.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.